Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is John Bruni. Welcome to the show today. It's going to be a great one. We have a fantastic guest, and I think you are going to really learn a lot of stuff today. Let me introduce him to you. Chris Chamberlin is the Director of Programming. He's the head trainer at WeckMethod Lab in San Diego, California, which has been featured in Men's Health, NBC Sports, podcasts, all kinds of media. I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you've heard of Wep Method. With over 12 years of coaching experience and a lifetime worth of personal practice, he's an industry leader in educating the fundamental principles of human movement. He is also credited with the completion of numerous continuing education certifications, too many to list here today. So pumped to have you on the show. Welcome to the show, Chris Chamberlin.
Dude, I'm super excited, John. Thank you guys for having me out. So
awesome. I am really looking forward to you sharing today. First of all, I love Wep Method products. I use the Bosu Elite every day, the RMT Club just about every workout. And what's really cool about it is my history with this stuff goes way back. When my wife and I were preparing for our world record, we have a very strange world record. I lay underneath a bed of nails, and she jump ropes on top of it. And when we were prepping that for the Guinness Book of World Records television show, the only way that she could replicate it, because it's too painful to practice every day, she jumped on one of the original Bosu balls, did jump roping. And so it strengthened her ankles. I mean, it was about a year's worth of prep just with the Bosu ball to get ready for that world record. And then secondly, I'm looking forward to you sharing about how Wep Method's going to improve people's performance, while at the same time their aesthetics, and how listeners can experience the life change that Wep Method provides. Can you share with us some of your background, how you got into training and coaching, and then how did you wind up with Wep Method? Because, I mean, it's a very interesting thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a kind of a cool background. So my little guy, of course, is here for all the listeners. So I got started. I actually was a carpenter. I grew up with my father, sort of working the fields, working land, working as a laborer in construction. So I sort of had this relationship with tools as well as my own body, and manipulating those with my own strength and having to be efficient to sort of keep up on the job site in that sense. So I kind of come from not the fitness industry as far as my thinking goes on it. That led into getting into the gym, working out more. I played football in high school and all that. So I had the high school athletics and things growing up. So I got into the weight room there. And what sort of happened was, I'm not an overly huge guy. I'm 180. My brother's like 6'4", 250. He was a big guy. He was a starting tight end. He had a full ride to tech. So I was sort of a little smaller than him, and everybody was pushing me to sort of be in that same sort of athletic respect as him. And being smaller and needing to be more efficient to keep up with him, I think was a big driver for me in feeling or exploring things maybe differently than how some might traditionally step up to something. That led to me actually hating the weight room for a moment because coaches pushed me so hard. It didn't feel right on me sometimes. And sort of what brought me back was actually getting into the kettlebell. So kettlebell practice, learning from the RKC originally, and what is now the Strong First and RKC sort of blend. That world, and dealing with a tool or implement that demanded a little bit more of a patience or practice to develop a skill set with it, I think really came home for me as an athlete, and really made me fall in love and become passionate about exercise again. And just like I think most everybody in the industry, that sort of that early on phase of like that passion, that drive of just your own personal practice is almost like infectious. Like you want to give it to other people, and people want it from you. They're asking for it. And I actually was being asked to be a coach before I even made the process in my own head to become a coach. But yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher early on in my life, and it sort of kind of whittled its way down to that ability to actually be a teacher of movement and developing a personal practice and movement, which started with the kettlebell. Now, years down the road, I'd obviously been exploring the kettlebell for most of it. I moved to sunny San Diego. So I'm originally from Washington, D.C. area. So I'm an East Coaster. Um, I came here, I've been here about 7 years now. I've known David for about 4 of those. Being here, again, that idea that I was always sort of looking at movement a little different, like exploring it in my own practice a little differently. David immediately just stuck out like a sore thumb to me. Like there's a mad scientist that lives here in San Diego, and I want to learn from that guy. And I'd sort of been getting all these little trickles, like these little bits of like people were saying something about him around me. And there was a gentleman, Chris Daly, I always give him credit for this, that really gave me and David our first introduction, or my first introduction to Wep Method. He's a local gym owner here, does a lot of awesome stuff. But he got me and David together, and it just was like just a pairing, man. We both just started clicking together. I was more of a physical practice. He was more of a digging into things at the moment, didn't know how to express it quite yet. And that's where we've really married each other, is like being able to practice now together and express information and make it digestible for everybody. So that's sort of my general history on that.
I love that. And what's interesting is back in the day, kettlebelling, using the kettlebell, your gear of voice, however you want to describe it, people were kind of outliers at the beginning. I remember when I first got my kettlebell, well, I got a plate loaded. I made my own. I went to the welder because I had read Pavel's book, and I'm like, hey, I got to make one of these. And then my first one all I could afford was a 70-pounder. So I was doing ridiculous stuff right in the very beginning, but everybody's like, what is this thing? Now it's totally mainstream. I mean, I look at, all that, and I think a lot of the things with Wep Method in the beginning, it does seem like crazy stuff, which we'll get into. But I think as people start to understand the physiological things that are happening, it's going to definitely become way more mainstream. So what is Wep Method? Can you just describe it as an overview of it for people?
I'll kind of give the two thing. I feel like it's been a big question that people ask all the time. It's maybe a little confusing at first. And I think that's because we're sort of coming in at 2 fronts, and we've sort of unified that around one concept. So I'll discuss that. So basically, Wep Method is a subsidiary of Bosu. So the Bosu ball, the original Bosu ball. So I think everybody that would be listening to this would be familiar with that. But what we are an innovation company specifically. So we're not actually dead set on only the health and fitness industry. We're currently focused on it right now. And within that, those 2 different sects I mentioned, we focus on product development, and we focus on also training and methodology, like principles, techniques. And then we sort of marry those together. So it's almost like a diamond. Like we are innovation, we focus on product and development as well as methodology, and then we bring all those back together so that our products actually match our training as well. So that's sort of the gist of it when we look at it from a broad scope.
And it's great stuff. I mean, if anybody gets on the website, you're going to find a lot of unique things, especially exercises. So I want to break this down, kind of get into some of the tools that I think are just so valuable. One of my favorite tools is the Bosu Elite. Now, again, I shared already, we had one of the original Bosu balls and went through all that. What makes the Bosu Elite? Because I try and explain it to people that follow me and do some of these things, the differences. Can you share with us what makes it different than other stability products, specifically the regular Bosu ball, like you can buy at a Target or somewhere, and how you use, and this is the thing I use it almost every workout, how you can use priming to instantly help you lift more. I use priming, again, all the time. I even use it when I was training for pulling trucks, all these different things. Priming does so much, but I want you to kind of get into it as the master here and kind of share that with everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is where we painted that picture of these 2 things going on. So David obviously invented the original Bosu ball, right? So with that in the market for years and understanding it better after the creation of it and sort of what our prime function was in the methodology to train people through. And it was to bring things back to core function, to gait function, to locomotion, which we'll probably expand on a little later. But this idea of creating like a center line strength. And instead of standing on the balance trainer to fight balance and feel unstable, rather we stand on it or put our hands on it and we attempt to compress or squeeze it as hard as we can you mentioned this sort of priming effect. So this idea of using an elastic to create an isometric in a sense, right? And it can never really be true isometric, but with elastics and air pressure like that, unlike maybe taking a rope or pushing against a wall or something like that, where it sort of has this like, that's it, that elastic member will constantly be trying to accelerate, right? So that it's trying to return back to its shape. So it's creating a little bit of this like this micro stimulus that excites the nervous system, excites the musculature, and it excites you in a very short period of time. So you're able to establish an intent, is what I like to call it, like an intent, like the purpose, prepare in minimal time with minimal breakdown and minimal energy expenditure, so that I'm really ready to go for what really matters to me: pulling the truck, making the deadlift, hitting the bench, whatever it be, sprinting, whatever my event be. That's the general purpose of it. So that Bosu Elite, comparative to other balance trainers, again, it's really about how that membrane on it is actually very thick. So you don't know by looking at it. It's a cooler color, I think. It's that nice gray, and it's darker, which is always, I think, sleek. But it's actually thicker. So it's not actually, when you get on it, you're not feeling overly unstable on it. You're able to compress it to feel stable, be stable, and develop strength within balance and stability, right?
And it holds a ton of weight compared to that's what I try and tell people, because like I tell people, like, I've done fat bells on these things. I've done kettlebell exercises on the Elite. A big guy like me does the sprints on, and so most people are like, can this thing take the abuse? Can you kind of explain how, you could put this in a commercial gym? Well, of course there are too, of abuse that it can take.
Yeah, I'm not going to swear by a number or anything, I don't think, on here, but it definitely, I know we were pushing really, again, the strength training component on. So the compression strength on it, the actual compression itself is solid. But you're mentioning here too, I really love lifting on the Bosu Elite. I like using a trap bar, especially with all these newer trap bars that are super open-ended. The safety sort of really goes up when you want to try to take advantage of a surface area like this where you can compress, because you can bail out nice and easy. But one of my co-head coaches here, Alex Canellis, a real strong guy, we really were pushing bench on it there for a minute. We use it as a bench pressing surface because of all the surface area. So a lot of people switch to a fat pad for surface area. But what's really cool about the Elite, again, it sort of contours to you as you're benching. It creates surface area and it meets surface area as you go through the full range of motion, which is awesome. And I mean, he worked up to 405 on it. We didn't even want to put an article out on it until we at least got 400 up. And we that's actually on our website. If you check out our blog, we have a cool little article on that and why it's it's really good to use that as a variation of benching as well. So another tool in the toolbox in that respect. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Can you explain the coiling core training? One of the very first exercises I did on the Bosu Elite when we got it was the Supermans, and not the traditional Superman. When people hear this, they think it's about just swinging. I'm talking about the actual coiling Superman, and how when you do some of these exercises and you start to engage the lats and the lower back, that, David talks about this wind at the back phenomenon, but it's true. The first time you do that, you start doing these compression exercises, and all of a sudden you feel like you can, I was doing them pre-sprint the first time, and all of a sudden you feel like you've got a hop in your step, the wind at the back. Can you explain what this whole coiling core training is and how that phenomenon takes place?
Absolutely. So let me break into that a little more. We sort of have, our goal is that our main focus on the methodology side is to establish an understanding of core function via rotation and what that means in our language and our understanding of it. And we sort of have three different variations of core rotation function we talk about. One being sort of the staple or foundation to our method, which is coiling core training, which I'll kind of show a little side bend here a little bit. So it's this idea of taking the core and establishing a side bend, right, or maximum end range of rotation there. And it's while still maintaining very specific landmarks that relate to just walking, to locomotion, general gait cycle, things like that. So my eyes are staying level, things like that. We also discuss rotational movement training. So a lot of our products are named after this, where I move from one coil to the other coil. So the ability to express from side to side, rotational movement. And then 1 second here. And then the last piece to that is actually, hold on here, guys. Sorry, my son's with me. He's feeling a little upset here. The last component is something we refer to as bilateral torsion training, which is actually this version of essentially your traditional strength training. Guys, I gotta take a second here. Sorry.
That's no problem. I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we were talking about. I wanted to talk a little bit about the 3 different forms of rotation we were talking about. We're going to which is the idea. I'll kind of get a good view for you guys here. It's this idea of establishing a side bend. So this idea of a maximum side bend, right shoulder to left hip, and sort of developing an isometric there. We call it like a move without move. So I'm able to actually move my whole body while maintaining that side bend of that isometric. Then rotational movement training is just an expression from that side bend to the other side bend. So understanding that that full range of motion is accessible to me. I don't always have to tap the entirety of it, but I can access it. And then the final form of rotation, it's what people I think are more familiar with, which again, we would call bilateral torsion, which is this idea of the center, which is traditional, conventional lifting, broad jumping, anything like that, that would be coming from the center, but it can be educated and understood better, potentially, again, if we understand the sides at full range or the coil, right? So those are our 3 forms of rotation. And then you had mentioned you were very interested in coiling core specifically because it really is what makes us special here at Wep Method. It's really the foundation of all of it because it really is, again, the understanding of what it means to, what is okay in regards to side bending. How far can I go? And then it's using the idea that locomotion is sort of our prime function. So walking is our prime function. And if we hit landmarks that are very specific to that, starting from the top down, it will keep me from over-rotating, if you will, or relating to gravity in a way that keeps me still moving forward and doing less that looks like more that gives me more type thing. So efficiency is kind of the game plan here. And you mentioned just specifically working out on the Bozo Elite, great product to explore it, but all tools are a great way to explore it. And one of the first ways we introduce somebody to this, there's a skill and a playlist on our website, if you actually check it out, called the Royal Coil. It's actually the drill that basically made me fall in love with David and fall in love with this methodology. I used it myself. I wasn't overly interested in running at the time, but I used it as a way to increase my bench press in the kettlebell world by like 35 pounds. So I went from like a 120 at 56 kg to 68 kg type bench press, which was a big deal for me. And it got me stoked that was also going to help me be a better runner at that time. And it has to this day. And again, you'll be able to explore that movement practice. That's why I said we separate the product line from the methodology in a sense, because we have tools that we feel teach it and make you understand it best, but they can also come under the methodology can come under any tool that you love, and you can still apply the training and methodologies of rotation within it. All right, cool.
Good stuff.
Yep.
How would you say the lats and the lateral chain are underused in most training programs? And how does the Wep method really activate the lats? This whole lateral chain, I find it's like a major weakness in most training programs. How do you activate that lateral chain?
Absolutely. So we talk about this idea of that side bend, right? And it really comes into 2 different things, I think. I think it's the external oblique as well as the lat. And I think understanding those 2 different core functions and understanding the difference between what I would refer to as a torsion line, you can now potentially analyze your own practice, or as a coach, you can analyze what you're doing with an individual and sort of developing a balance between the 2 lines, right? And the way that we sort of establish the lines, as I mentioned, was through that Royal Coil, or that maximum side bend, that coil and core training. Sort of when you first do it with somebody, they will be feeling, when you get to the posture, they'll be feeling a very specific contraction. And I find that it's usually either the external oblique itself, or it's the low lats in a sense. Okay. And that will sort of tell you where somebody's dominant in their movement pattern or chaining. And then you could start exploring based on what the individual is practicing on where you need to keep the balance of that or relationship to it. Or we could just focus on one depending on what we're going for. All right.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because a lot of people are focused on anti-rotation only. And by doing this, they don't realize you actually, increase your ability on anti-rotation exercises. I found that it carries over. You wouldn't think it would, but it just does. And talk about this whole idea of locomotion when we walk, when we run. I know you guys have the pulsars and some of those, and I haven't got my hands on pulsars yet, but I kind of understand the concept. And one of the things about locomotion I think is so important is it's how our nervous system is wired. Whether it's people learning to crawl again, to be able to run correctly. When you start looking at those mechanics, can you kind of break down what locomotion is and how it can be improved?
Yeah. So when I first came into Wec Method, David's prime function and thought process was locomotion in like something we absolutely relate to, and that's bipedal movement, walking, running. It's something that we all have in common. It's like our birthright to be able to do it, right? I've sort of expanded on it. I have a little more history in aerials, so like silks and circ type stuff. I'll just throw it at that, and gymnastics, things like that. I do swimming, so other forms of human locomotion in a sense, right? And I sort of look at it like I take everything he says there, and they should all be able to relate to each other, right? Locomotion, moving from point A to point B is how I teach it in our courses, is when I open up the floor to ask about it. It's just moving from point A to point B. How do we do it? And if I lobbed off your arms and your legs, what does it look like from your core? And there's some very key, very specific things that your core is able to do to make that happen. And then if I start adding back distal extremities, it starts to create unique looking expressions of it, even though the core function itself looks exactly the same. So we sort of tie everything in. I would say generally we're going to be looking at it for bipedal movement, that ability to walk. It should sort of all come back to that. But I personally myself sort of branch that out and start looking at it. And I use aerials a lot, like the ability to just swing from one monkey bar to the other as something that I will test all of my theories or my concepts and my ideas or my movements behind moving those back and forth. Did I answer that?
Yeah, it's great stuff. How is it important to understand total body integration? One of the things I find is that, when people have some sort of deficiency or injury, they often find the body working against itself because they have things locked up. They don't know how to make the body work as a unit. Can you explain about how Wec Method tries to bring about that total body integration so the body's working the way it should?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a couple forms of this, but I think if we were to go into a Wec Method product line specifically here, I would talk about the RMT rope. So our rolling rope practice. I used to work out 6 hours a day. I loved moving. I loved grinding. I loved all that. And I used to put a lot of time into mobility, as we'll call it, right? Warming up, all this stuff, where I would spend a lot of time on like specific parts of my body. And it was a lot of time, and it was time that my clients didn't have. And that was very valuable to me. But after getting the rope, we call it sort of like it sort of integrates the body. I like to give people the reference of, you can think of back in the day, like when you're a kid, you have like a cup and it's tied together with a string, and you can talk through it, and the vibration sends the information to the other cup, right? So old school telephone. The rope for us, when we connect to the cordage like that between our hands, it integrates the body, and it sends information from the dominant side to the non-dominant side, and it allows us to start putting together complex patterns while sort of obeying the law that the rope needs to stay taut so that the information can be sent through it and I can get the feedback from it. Now, when I do that, I start to integrate the entire body together, and I start to get immediate feedback, immediate information on where I am right now. So I can put it in my grandmother's hand that's 90, and she will be right where she needs to be, following that rule and that understanding of it, because me as her coach telling her where to be position wise or whatever is not as beneficial as her body telling her where to be when she's responding to that tool, right? So I can put it in a pro athlete's hands, I can put it in my hands, I can put it in whoever's hands, and it will meet their mobility, their integration right where they're at, so that they can start putting reps in and building upon that, layer by layer, rep by rep, and being integrated with a tool like that. Now, when you get integration like that with a tool that like is hands-on, that doesn't allow you to move freely as a human being, things like the pulsers can come into play, because now they're a tool in each hand that can be manipulated more strategically, and they will have a better carryover to locomotion itself. And I think, sorry guys, dadding it up over here. There you go, bud. There you go, bud. All right. Yeah, so I think, again, like using tools to help somebody understand how to integrate with their body as a whole unit, rather than focusing on maybe specific joint stuff or specific stretches, things like that.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the RMT Club. Now, I got clubs in my basement that weigh 45 pounds all the way down to 5 pounds. But the one that I use all the time, especially in warm-ups, is that 8-pound RMT Club. Can you explain, because there's clubs everywhere. Everybody's got, you can see them everywhere. Can you explain a little bit about the feedback that you get from this? It's the same concept as inside the pulsers, that there's moving weight. It gives you kind of instant feedback when you can hear the weight moving around. It's shifting. And then for somebody like me who's had just tons of shoulder issues over the years from doing heavy, stupid stuff, can you tell about how there's kind of magic in these movements and how you can, integrate the whole body? I mean, you're going into moving mills and things like that. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a little brief history on me too. I've been playing with clubs since I was 16. I made my own metal ones in my backyard, and I absolutely love them. I think they are awesome practice. They've been a staple in my training since the beginning with kettlebells. What's really cool about that is that I come in the door here and I get to experience this new club, the RMT Club, and it is a new experience. It provides something different that I didn't have when I was teaching people clubs. And I think this is really cool because those patterns, like if you don't know how to teach them, or early on, like you said, like even kettlebells, they were like such a nuance, like people didn't know what it was. It wasn't that like collective understanding of how to do something. And I think the club's sort of like now getting almost where the kettlebell was with that now, like sort of breaking that barrier. It's more open. People like On It, stuff like that are selling them. This club though, what it does, because we sort of we're thinking about integrating like a movement methodology with it as well. We have these extra feedback or these sensations that come from it. And it has steel shot in it. So what it does is it allows you to hear an audible feedback. So when I'm doing traditional moves like the mill, the 360, 10 to 2s, things like that with a club or a mace, it's giving me a feedback throughout it that I'm trying to keep it quiet. And that tells me that I'm at that full length of my body and I'm keeping that long and strong posture, which is part of our methodology. And for a general consumer or user, they're getting an experience right there in them because of the product, or giving them a feedback or a cue without somebody having to tell them. So you can learn patterns that are more advanced and things like that very quick, and you can develop your shoulder health better, right? You can recover or rehab or prehab, whatever you're doing in regards to that. Now, on more of a performance aspect of it, I'm using a lightweight. You said you have that 8. That 8's the heavy one, and I went ooh right away because that's the heavy guy technically in our world for the RMT Club. And I prioritize using the 4 a lot. Because what it'll let me do is it'll allow me to rapidly change directions quickly. Because of that steel shot within it, it's sort of similar to our Propulse speed trainers. It's going to create this hit and then a recoil back, and you can respond to those recoils. You can either use them as like what I would call like a chambering effect, that I can pull it in to feel more loaded or established, okay? Or I can use it as a tool to ricochet or rebound back and forth rapidly. And that will increase the intensity of movement. And I can use a club that's only 4 pounds instead of having to pull out my big guys, my 45s and my 35s and these heavy clubs, which are beautiful too and a great expression and way to use these patterns and things too. So it's a unique tool and element in itself, and great for performance and recovery.
And then the leverage aspect, when I first got it, because I said I've got all these different clubs. Some are wood, some are steel. I mean, some have the rubber around them. Just had all these collections, been collecting it for years. You pick this thing up and you think, oh my goodness, I'm taking it out of the box. It's plastic on the end. What in the world? And then you realize it's all about leverage. It has one of the most unique feels of any club I've ever used. There's a uniqueness to it. And the way I'm understanding it is here, they tried to make the handle as light as possible so that all the weight goes into the end. And so for people that, it's hard to really explain the feeling that you get because it is a totally different leverage factor than most clubs out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that light handle makes a big difference, and the length of it. So we try to keep it still very small and still get that big feedback from it so that you can move quickly and like through mobility drills like halos and, like I said, mills and all sorts of things like that, right? And again, all of those elements combined really create that experience and a unique style of training with the club itself.
Now, here's one of the crazy things about Wep Method that I think is cool, that it has really changed. And the only reason it's really gotten into it is because this whole idea of the priming. It's so interesting that you learn to put pressure on the outside of the foot. This is so counterintuitive to anybody probably listening that has not tried this yet. It's so counterintuitive to athletes. Can you explain how that increases performance and the benefits of learning to do that, to put pressure from those outer bones in the feet, the green dots?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a piece of what we're doing here, right? And it really relates to, again, that idea of like bipedal movement, bipedal locomotion. And what we're looking about, we refer to that green dot, as you call it, right? The outside front edge of the foot, or the fourth and fifth metatarsal, are sort of the most distal part of your heel, right? They're the furthest you can get out and still relate to structure on the body. So if I end up relating to it or getting my weight out to it, it will spring me back and send me launching and secure and balanced as I move through that inside of the foot or out to the big toe side, or we call it the go zone, go to zone. I start from the go zone, which is sort of that outside edge area, a green dot area. And then as I'm moving through athletic movement, through locomotion, I will then pour out the other side as weight is shifting and transferring for the other side, right? And again, this whole idea, this is where we can kind of go back to like the Bozo Elite. We were creating this sort of center line strength, or this pin strength, where we're actually thinking about that point now that we're talking about that. If I'm doing squat on the Bozo Elite, I'm doing like a wall wedge, sort of like very athletic, aggressive, angled type squat against a wall. That's going to be my prime spot. I'm going to be thinking about that. I'm going to be thinking about my toes staying extended, and I'm going to be thinking where I think a lot of people are thinking about tissue and tension when they're training, and we're trying to get soft from that. We sort of have this Marshall thought, like this getting soft, going to nothing, and trying to be structured. So we're thinking about bone stacking, about tendons, ligaments, fascia, all that, all working together, and then we can tap tissues and then develop strength from there. And when we sort of imagine like that picture on anatomy trains, the front of that, and trying to float and be that, right? And then wedge into that structure and then amplify that experience from there and ramp up, right? And that spot is going to give you the most security in regards to stacking the bones, feeling like that tensegrity, that full body structure balance.
Yeah, and it's just something totally unique to the system. Like I said, it's counterintuitive to most athletes, and then once they start doing it, you see an instant improvement. I was doing a lot of sprinting at the time when I first started with the Bosu ball. Now I'm doing different modalities. The very first workout I did, it changed my running gait totally. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm a big guy, so it's not very graceful anyway, but it was a total different experience doing sprints after priming those outside, parts of the feet like that. So it's very interesting. Well, let me ask you just a couple more questions. What's one thing our listeners could do today to improve their performance? Let's say they're out there and, they don't have any equipment yet, but they want to, they go to the gym or whatever it is. What's one thing they could do right now that would make a huge difference?
I've mentioned it a couple times already, and it's to go to our playlist right now on our website under our training and tenets and principles and look at the drill called the Royal Coil, right? It's literally, it was my first exposure to all of this, and now I head it. And it was that impactful and powerful to me in my own personal practice that I pursued coming in here to become head coach in this and to keep exploring every day on these methodologies and principles. And it will, if you just keep doing it before the things you love, whatever you love. I'm not telling you got to change anything about what you do. Go do it with what you love and see how it affects what you love. And I can guarantee that you will feel something profound, and it will benefit you in what you're doing. And it did that for me. I know it will do it for you. And that's it. That's the thing. And then from there, and you start understanding it, that's where we get into WeckMethod products. And that's where I said we develop those products with our method in mind. So we're using those as tools to amplify the experience we're trying to create. And then when you sort of understand that experience, then that experience can be put into any modality, any tool that you love. And my mission sort of is to show that all the time. I really showed a lot of the kettlebell. That was my baby. That's my start of my fitness career. And I'm going to explore it there a lot. That's where I heavily do it. I've been getting a lot into strongman community with it as well. I do a lot of Atlas stone lifting and log lifting and whatever. I love odd objects. I was a carpenter. It's kind of my life. I love that kind of stuff and carries and all that. So I explore it there a lot too, but that's what I'm saying. It sort of has its applications. We have sports performance stuff we can do with anything. Royal Coil, that's the starting place. And the website is where to check it out.
Absolutely. Well, last question. What's
Yes,
next
sir.
for you? Is there any new courses going to be offered, or is there something new that you guys are going to be doing? And if there's anything else that you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we have a course right now called PBR. It's Pulsars, Bands, and Ropes. So it's sort of an introductory course or foundations course with so like a low level entry stuff as far as the products go, but you get all the methodology so you understand it. That's current. That's a live stream course you can do right now. On top of that, we're now with COVID sort of regulations being lifted a little bit, especially here in California, we are going to be going live again. And I think that is going to be the first course that we start going live with again. There's going to be a new updated version of what was our traditional course called the WMQ, which was a 2 to 3 day event that we do live here in the lab in San Diego, which is the coolest course that I have ever obviously been part of, like being able to be like the head of it, but also actually experience. Like it really, we try to cater to coaches in a way that I don't think we get catered to in this industry typically, because I think coaching is such a valuable tool, and I think we get underappreciated on that a little bit. Aside from that, we got some cool products. I'll drop a little. I don't know. There's something. I'm gonna drop there's something coming out that I think we need to be looking for. And if you like a Bozu Elite, you like what we're talking about, you like feeling balanced, you're going to want to watch what's coming up in the next couple of weeks here at WeckMethod. And that's where we are.
Now, when you guys drop this thing, it's not going to be sold out right away like the Bosu. Like people can't get the Bosu Elite that want one right now, I'm told.
I know.
So,
I know. Yep. We're stocked. You may have gotten there. Actually, I'm not going to say it, but yeah, we're stocked. We got something coming that's going to be real great. So
you
I'm
heard
very
it here,
excited
people.
about it. I think the whole team is super, super excited about it, by the way. So
I'm fired up. So everybody, you heard it here first. Be watching. It's going to be super, super exciting. I want to thank our guest today, Chris Chamberlin, for investing in all of our listeners today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. You guys were great.